Hello, hello, hello. Good morning. My name is Kevin Brinson. Today we're going to be exploring functions in Excel. Now, Excel is mostly about numerical data, but at times you could come across the data which has too much text, and that this is the time when text functions in Excel will help you to simplify things easily. So today we're going to talk about three different functions from the text category. So the first one we're going to talk about is, let me minimize that really quick. Nobody wants to see that. Cool. All right. So the first one we're going to talk about is CONCAT. Now, CONCAT is the newer version. If you have Excel 2016 or later, this is the newer version of what concatenation was. The concatenate function was from, as you can see, the older versions of Excel. Now, the functionality of both concat and concatenate function are relatively the same. It's just the concat is more updated and more adapted to work with the newer versions of Excel. Now, the concat function combines the text from multiple ranges and/or strings, but it does not provide a delimiter or ignore empty arguments. You'll know what I mean later. Now, let's look at the syntax for concat. Concat, you put the equal signs first, and then you put concat text1 and text2. Now, text1, you're gonna have to make sure that you put something in for text1, but not necessarily for text2, because as that is optional. So for text1, the text item to be joined, and that can be a string or an array of strings, such as an array of cells that you can put together. Now, since text2 is optional, those are just any additional items that want to be joined. Now, you have to keep in mind that there is a character limit. When I say character limit, I mean like the maximum of 253 text arguments for the text items. It can be a string, an array of strings, or a range of cells. So 253 is a lot. So that means that you can keep going. Say this is text 1, text 2. You can probably go all the way up to 200 if need be. You know what I mean? So this makes it flexible. This makes it possible for you to add a bigger line and put them together. Now, for example, we're going to put these words together. Notice how it's set up. We have the equals, concat, and then we have the arguments. Now I can tell there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 5, 6 arguments in this statement right now. So you have the, and then you have the quotations, and then you have followed by the comma. Now when you see this is just a space in between, because without these quotation marks with these commas, this whole line at the end would appear together. And if you know basic grammar, you can't stick all your words in one sentence. That doesn't make any sense. You would have to put spaces in between for the reader to be coherent of what's going on, so they don't have to try to read everything all at once. So you can see that repeated throughout the whole statement. Now, we have that, and then we have the space in between sun, and so forth and so forth. The same thing with the commas and splitting it up with quotations. All the way up until tomorrow where you see the period. That's where the sentence ends. Pretty simple. That's how you string it together. That's how you use the concat. Now let's do an example. Okay. So what we have here, I put a few examples up there just to see what we can do with this concat function. Now, the first one you see in the first column, and in the second column we have A's and B's ranging from numbers 1 to 7. Now, it says, because this function allows full column and row references, it returns this. Now, let's clean this up a little bit, because Excel was picking up the data from the later examples, and we don't want to do that. So we want to specify what cells we want it to grab. So what I would do is, you would see A2, that's A2. You could just click on it. Click on it. for the formula. Okay, let's just go back a little bit. This is one of the approaches that you can do. So I would do a 2 to about B8. That's B8. Selecting the whole thing. Now you're able to see that Excel took up and combined these two columns where you can see it's going back and forth. You got A's, B's, A1, B1, A2, B2, A4, B4, A5, B5. So that's how it did it, and that's how it strung it together. Now, usually, if this was by itself, what would happen is if I just did A for the first range, comma, B colon for the second range. Now let's just pretend these aren't here. What it would do is organize it as such. So since we have the A column first, comma, and then the B column, it would look like A's, A1, A2, A4, A5, A6, A7. And then right after that, it would look like, so it would kind of look like what's going on down here, where it would be A1, 2, 3, 4. So it would look like that. And then it would be the B1, B2, B4, B5, because they're separating it. Now this time, all right, so we can just, maybe we could just leave that as it is and go on to the next one. All right, so this one is kind of what we did at first. This was the second approach of using CONCAT. Now, how it, we just click on the formula. Another way to view the formula is to hit F2, and it'll show you what I did. I hit enter, and it'll come back to us. So, like I said the first time, it goes from A's to B's, A1 to B1, A2 to B2. Very simple. It's not rocket science. The way how they put it together, I think it's kind of convenient. You know what I mean? If you have to put things together. Now this third example is a little more complicated. Just because it has words that we're inputting. So this is what I did before I start. This is how I stylized the function. Equals concat. Now I added my own fill-in words so that when Excel retrieves this data from the table, it'll flow more into a sentence. You'll see what I mean. So I have A22, A23, and A24. So clearly that would be A22 right here, A23, and then A24. So automatically you know that we are conjuring data just from the first column of the table, not from the third, not from the second, not from the third. So we just want information from the first column of this table. So as you can see in the function expression, that we're only using the cell references for the first column of that data table. Now, if you put these together, if you put A22, A23, A24, that sentence would only speak to brook trout, species 32. Now, that wouldn't make sense. If you were explaining that to somebody, like say if somebody was not from this country, let's say we have a visitor, say we have tourists, and they want to, and they're fishers, and they want to know something about brook trout and their species. You can't just say to them brook trout species 32, as it wouldn't make sense. You would kind of try to put it into a sentence to kind of make it more obvious of what you're trying to say. So I added stream population for, in quotation marks, comma, and then I added the 822 reference, which is brook trout. So stream population for brook trout, and then comma, next quotations, we have species for stream population for brook trout species, and then we have the last cell reference, 824 per mile. So in the results, you can see that the stream population for brook trout species is 32 per mile. So that is how you would use the CONCAT formula. Now, let's go on to the next one. So the next one is TEXTJOIN. TEXTJOIN function combines the text from multiple ranges and or strings and includes a delimiter you specify between each text value that will be combined. If the delimiter is an empty text string, this function will effectively concatenate the ranges. Now this one is interesting. This one is interesting because it's very similar to concat and concatenate. Just because of the functionality wise, they kind of look the same, but they're actually not. So if you were to look at it from a bird's eye view of what we already talked about, concat, the syntax for concat is text1 and text2, where text1 is required, text2 is not. As you can see with TEXTJOIN, it is a little bit more, it has a couple more arguments than that, let's say. You can see the text1 and then the text2, but now you have these things such as delimiter and ignore empty. Now, to specify what a delimiter is, because we talked about that in concat for just a little bit, we brushed past it. Delimiter, that is required with TEXTJOIN, and that is a text string either empty or one or more characters enclosed by double quotes or a reference to a valid text string. If a number is supplied, it will be treated as a text. You'll see that in the example. And then next we have ignore empty. That is the second argument of this function. Ignore empty, this is required just as the delimiter is required. So this is where you say true or false. And now here it's saying if it's true, ignore the empty cells. Let's go on a little bit. And then now that's just the rest of the arguments. As we already know from concat, text1 is required. Text item to be joined, a text string, an array of strings, we know that. And then text2, this would be optional, as it was with concat. That would be your additional text items to be joined. Now, keep in mind, the delimiter is required, ignore underscore empty is required, and text1 would be required. Now, okay, for example, this is what the syntax will look like in real life, in action, for an example. You would hit equal TEXTJOIN, open close paren, and then you have the quotation open, and then you hit comma. Now this is the delimiter. Now, and then this is the ignore empty, whether it be true or false. It can be either true or false. And then that's where you start stringing together your words to form that sentence, how it looks. Okay? So same thing here, kind of with concat, you have the quotations, you have the comma, and then the next word you have it in quotations, and then you have, the comma. Now, let me point out something that is distinctive between both concat and TEXTJOIN. Concat has if we can go back, yes, if we can go back, I want to show you what I'm talking about. So the distinguishing factor between concat and TEXTJOIN functions are the fact that these arguments are split up the way how it is. You have the empty quotation marks in between the words of the sentence. Whereas with TEXTJOIN, you have the open quotation mark only at the beginning. And everything else within these arguments is in the quotations, which is a little dissimilar. I don't want you to get confused. So I feel like that's important to point out that when you're using concat, put the empty quotation marks in between each word as you see here. Now let's do an example. All right, so we have these currencies: US dollar, Australian dollar, Chinese won, Hong Kong dollar, Israeli shekel, the South Korean won, and Russian ruble. So the way how it works is you would have to use the quotations, like I said before, at the beginning, and then you would write whether or not it's true or false, and then at the end, that would be the range. So to put it back into the language that we know, the delimiter would be at the beginning, and then the ignore empty argument would be next, true or false. We're putting true here, and then we're going to put the text1 argument at the end, which is required. So for the text1, we're going to string all of these. We're going to use the range from A2 to A8 to string it together. And notice how when we put everything together, it has a comma in between each of them just to keep them separated and organized. This is how we want it. If we didn't put the comma in between those quotation marks, then everything would be together. Now, if we have a tourist, that's at the museum, then they want to know about currency that we have. You can't tell them US dollar, Australian dollar, Chinese yuan, you know what I mean? Like, you can't say them all together. You have to take pauses in between each just to distinguish them from each other. All right? And then now, the next example, we have this where we have cells, we have columns A, columns B, same as before with CONCAT. We have A1, A2, A4, A5, A6, A7, and the same with B column. Now, the same thing that occurred before with the above example, where we have the comma separating these two ranges so it's more organized. We have A1 and then B1 and then A2 and then B2 and A4 and then B4, how they're all, taking pauses in between each factor just to organize it more. Now, if I remember from CONCAT, they didn't do that. So if you're looking for something to better organize your data, and if you want it to be, cleaned up a little bit, then I would definitely use the TEXTJOIN, as it is more, I feel like, more adapted from CONCAT. As you can see, it's taking breaks in between each. CONCAT is not really that. So it depends on what type of data you're trying to organize, what type of data you're trying to put together. If you don't really mind, it being smushed together like that, it could be with, different scenarios, different situations, different, business methods, whatever the case may be. Okay, this CONCAT function might be for you. However, if you'd rather stylize it in a way where they're cut up in a way that they have breaks in between. So you're not saying A1, B1, A2, you're saying A1, B1, A2, B2, and so forth and so forth. So that's how we look at CONCAT and TEXTJOIN functions. Now, let's look at this review. So CONCAT, this function concatenates joins values supplied as references or constants. Unlike the concatenate function, which concat replaces, like I said before, this is the newer version of the concatenate function. For like I said before, Excel 2016 and later. So if you want to keep to date, as I'm sure they're tweaked in a way that they're similar, but they're not. But concatenate is not as updated as concat. So yeah, if you want to just keep up with these Excel updates, just so you can better use your data, you can better get the job done, you can better do what you have to do, I would definitely just using concat for all your text string and cohesion as you may need to, as should you need so. And then concat allows you to supply a range of cells to join in addition to individual cell references. So that was concat. TEXTJOIN. This function concatenates joins values with a given delimiter. Unlike the concat function, TEXTJOIN allows you to supply a range of cells and has a setting to ignore empty values. Now, this last one, text. Text is its own function. This is the text category, but this is specifically the text function. This function returns a number in a given format as text. You can use the text function to embed formatted numbers inside text. So right here, this is another definition. This function lets you change the way a number appears by applying formatting to it with format codes. It's useful in situations where you want to display numbers in a more readable format and you want to combine numbers with text or symbols. The syntax for this text function goes as follows: equals text, and then you have the first and then the second argument. The first argument is value, the number to convert. And then you have format text, format underscore text, and that's the number format you want to use. So, in its simplest form, the text function says equals text, open close paren, value you want to format, and then the format code you want to apply. Now, if we look at an example, you'll see what I mean. Okay. So what I did here was write out what the syntax of the function expression would look like for this date right here, May 3rd, 2021. Now, if you could look at the expression box, the formula bar expression box, whatever you want to call it, you'll see how it's written out. You'll see how it's inside the parentheses, today, and then open close paren, comma, month, day, year. So what this does is it conjures what today's date is for you. It kind of just does the work for you, in a way that, you know, if you just type in today, and no matter what day it is, you can have that appear to you. Now let's look at the next example. We have text, open close paren, 1,234 and 56, 567. So now the thing with the text function is automatically it rounds to the nearest second decimal point. So right here, it rounded it up to 57. So rightfully so. So this figure, as you can see here, the figure went from 1,234.567 to just 57 after rounding up that 6 to a 7. So it rounds it up for you, and it cleans it up in a way where it adds the currency, adds the dollar sign to it, so it's more readable. Then now, if you look at we were talking about format codes before. Now I want you to pay attention to how in the formula bar, it has the pound or number signs in the thousands. And you can tell that our numbers is in the thousands. So it added the dollar sign, the thousands number, and then so forth and so forth, just to get us this result. Now let's try something else. Let's try today's date. So we have Monday, and this is how the text function works. So if you write equals text today, open close paren, comma, the day, then it'll pop out like Monday. Very clean, very simple. If you want to conjure, or if you want to generate your values such as that, you would use the text function. But those are our text functions category for CONCAT, TEXTJOIN, and text. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next lecture.